The night does not have to end all at once. Sometimes it loosens its grip the way a warm blanket loosens from a shoulder, quietly, without a tug. If you are listening from a dim room, with the days still humming in your bones, let this story arrive like water. Not to pull you anywhere, only to carry you gently. Imagine the first pale light of morning touching the Nile. Not a bright, busy morning, just the soft beginning of one. The river is smooth as brushed silk, a long ribbon laid between banks of reeds and dark earth. A thin wind passes over the surface and makes the tiniest ripples like someone exhaling in their sleep. Far away a bird calls once, and then the sound dissolves into distance. You don't need to picture every detail perfectly. You don't need to hold the scene in your mind like a photograph. Just let it be there, somewhere behind your eyelids, like a remembered place you can visit without effort. And if you want, take one slow breath in and let it go even more slowly, as if your breath is learning from the river. Steady, unhurried, continuing. Along this river, people once woke to the same hush. They listened to the same water. They watched the same sky fade from deep blue to a gentle grey. And they built in that calm space between night and day a civilization that still rests under sand and sunlight, waiting like a closed book, patient and quiet. Tonight, you and I will open that book very slowly. Before we drift deeper into tonight's gentle journey, remember to subscribe to Ancient Sleep Story. Here, you'll always find peaceful stories that soothe the heart and quiet the mind. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. Here, no one rests alone. Every story from the past is a soft lantern in the dark, gently lighting our way tonight. Now, let us return to the Nile. Let your shoulders loosen and let the jaw rest softly. When you stand beside it in your imagination, you can feel how the air changes near water. It cools the skin by a small, comforting degree. It carries the clean scent of wet soil and green reeds. Somewhere nearby, you can almost hear a simple rhythm. Water brushing the bank. Water brushing the bank. A sound so consistent that the body begins to trust it. And that brings me to a question I like to keep in my pocket, like a smooth pebble. If you are in the dark right now, what Nile River sound would you play to make yourself slow down your breathing immediately? Would it be the soft lap of water against a wooden boat? The whisper of reeds bending together? Or the delicate splash of a fish turning beneath the surface, so small it feels like the river is speaking in a secret language? Hold whichever sound feels kindest. You can let it loop in your mind. Not loudly, just enough to guide you, the way a hand on the back guides a friend through a quiet doorway. Because the doorway we're about to step through is not only a doorway of place, it's a doorway of time. If you have ever lived in a modern city, if you have ever walked past bright windows and traffic lights and the hurry of other people, then you know how a day can pile itself on top of you. A stack of moments, a tower of messages, a list of things unfinished. But beneath every city there is another city. Beneath the newest street there are older streets. Beneath the pavement there are older footsteps. Time does not disappear, it layers. And sometimes, if you stand very still, you can almost feel those layers the way you can feel layers of fabric, one on top of another, each holding a different temperature, each with its own quiet weight. In Egypt, this is more than a metaphor. Modern neighborhoods can sit over temples that once caught the first sun of the world. Apartment buildings can rise where pillars once stood. A small cafe can be built above an ancient wall that has been waiting for centuries, unbothered by the noise above it. I am here tonight as your guide through those layers. You can think of me as a librarian of the desert, the kind who prefers to walk slowly, who turns pages with patience. I don't carry urgency, I don't carry alarms, I carry a lantern that does not glare, only glows, and I carry a small map. Not the kind of map that demands you follow a strict route. More like a hand-drawn sketch with soft edges, a suggestion. A promise that if we keep moving gently, we will find something peaceful. The map begins at the river because the river is where Egypt begins. The Nile is not only water, it is a rhythm that taught people how to measure the year. It is a mirror that taught people how to watch the sky. It is a long, breathing line that taught the body, human and animal alike, how to settle into patterns. And you, listening in your room, can borrow that lesson. Nothing in this story will rush you, nothing will shout. We will move like a quiet boat, forward, but softly. Now imagine that our path leaves the riverbank and follows a calm road. The road is not crowded. It is the kind of road you might walk in a dream, where everything is familiar but gently blurred. Palm trees lean over the edge, their fronds making slow shadows. The sun rises a little higher, but it remains mild, filtered through dust and distance. As we walk, you may notice that the landscape changes by degrees, not by sudden shifts. Green becomes tan, moist earth becomes dry soil. The air grows warmer yet still gentle, and with each small change, it's as if your mind is stepping farther away from the noise of today. Soon we reach a place where the ground feels older. You can sense it the way you sense age in a quiet stone wall. There is less decoration here, less movement, more silence. In the distance, a single tall stone shape stands where the light likes to land first. An obelisk, a needle of stone that seems to exist for one purpose, to catch dawn and hold it. Even if you have never seen one in person, you can imagine the feeling of it, how it points upward without effort, how it makes the sky feel even wider. The first sunlight touches its surface and the stone becomes a warm color, like honey poured over rock. There is no spectacle, only a soft glow that spreads slowly, as if the day is being painted into existence. Standing near it, you might feel something subtle inside your chest, that sense of being small in a way that is safe. Not small like being powerless, small like being held by something vast and steady, like a child listening to rain on a roof, realizing the world is large and still protective. This is where we begin our true descent into the story, because the ancient world does not only rise into the sky, it also sleeps beneath the ground. There are places in Egypt where you can stand on sunlit sand, and beneath you, many meters down, there are chambers cut into limestone, rooms where the air is cooler, where sound is softer, where the dust has had time to settle into a perfectly even layer, as if time itself has been smoothing the floor. Our map leads us toward one of these hidden places, not with drama, not with fear, just with curiosity that feels like kindness. We pass a simple boundary, a fence far away, a sign faded by heat. Not as a warning, but as a gentle reminder, some quiet places are protected so they can remain quiet. We do not push, we do not pry. We only approach with respect, the way you approach someone sleeping, and then, as the world above grows bright, we find a narrow path downward. The descent is slow. Step by step, the temperature changes. The air becomes cooler, like shade collected in stone. Our lantern becomes more noticeable, not harsh, just present. The sound of the river is still with us, but now it arrives as memory, a faint hush in the background. At the bottom, the space opens. Imagine a chamber where the floor is made of stone so smooth it feels like a still pool. If you could run your fingertips along it, you would feel not roughness, but a calm, flatness, like the surface of a mirror that reflects light softly instead of throwing it back. The walls are pale limestone. The ceiling is low enough to make everything feel close and safe. And in the center, resting quietly, waiting without impatience, there is a single object that draws the eye. Not a treasure, not a glittering crown. Something simpler. A stone vessel shaped with care. A sarcophagus sealed long ago, as if someone wanted it to remain untouched, unbothered. Here is the small seed of our gentle mystery. If something has been sealed for so long, what kind of silence has it been keeping? We will not answer quickly. We will not yank the story open. We will sit beside this moment for a while, the way you sit beside a river and let it speak in its own time. And if tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. If this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys. For now, just stay with me here, in the cool hush of stone. The lantern glows, the air is steady, and somewhere very far above, the Nile continues to breathe. In the next part of our journey, we will begin to read what the stone has been holding, not with loud answers, but with soft discoveries. We stay a little longer in that quiet chamber, because some places deserve to be entered the way you enter sleep, slowly, with respect for the softness. The sealed stone rests in the center like a thought that has been held for a very long time. Not a thought that aches, a thought that simply waits. Our lantern makes a small pool of light on the smooth floor, and the rest of the room remains in gentle shadow. If you listen closely, you can almost hear your own breathing as the loudest sound. So let's make it an easy sound. Breathe in softly and breathe out as if you are fogging a mirror. It is strange, isn't it, how the body understands stone as safety, how a thick wall can make the mind feel protected, the way a quiet library feels protected from the world's hurry. That is why I like to guide you into history through places like this. Not through noise, not through conflict, only through the steady craftsmanship of people who once woke up, worked, and went home under the same sun we know today. If we turn our lantern slightly, you'll notice something else. The stone here is not rough. It has been shaped, smoothed. The corners are patient, the lines deliberate. And suddenly, without needing to open the sealed vessel at all, we can begin to read the room itself. Because long before stories were written in books, they were written in surfaces. In the way a floor was leveled, in the way a doorway was aligned, in the way a wall was polished, until it felt like calm water. This is where the Nile returns to our story again, like a recurring lullaby. To shape stone, you need more than strength. You need time, you need rhythm, you need transport. And in ancient Egypt, transport meant the river, always the river, patiently carrying heavy things as easily as it carries a leaf. So in your imagination, let's rise out of this chamber for a moment, just enough to follow the path of the stone itself. We step back up toward the surface. The air warms slightly with every step. The shadows thin, and when we emerge, the morning light meets us without harshness. From here, our path travels south along the Nile, toward a place where the rock underfoot changes color. Aswan. Even the name feels like a smooth stone in the mouth. Here, near the river, the granite lies close to the surface, pink and warm-toned, speckled like distant constellations trapped inside stone. In the quiet of early morning, you can imagine workers moving through a quarry with measured movements, not frantic, not loud. Their tools are simple, their patience is not tap, tap, tap. A sound like a heartbeat, steady and small. Sometimes people imagine ancient labor as a blur of intensity, but I prefer to imagine it as a long, composed breath, a day of work as a day of rhythm, Hands that know what to do because they have done it many times before. They mark lines, they follow seams in the rock. They wedge and ease, until a block begins to separate from the earth as gently as a piece of bread separating from a loaf. And when it finally loosens, no one cheers, no one shouts. The stone simply becomes available, as if the earth has decided, after a long sleep, to offer a single thought to the world above. Then comes the journey back north. Imagine a barge on the Nile, wide, low, steady. The granite block sits on it like a sleeping animal, heavy but calm. The river holds it without complaint. Water is good at carrying what we could never carry alone. The sail fills with a mild wind. The boat glides. The banks slide past slowly. Reeds, palms, mud brick villages, a distant line of desert where the color softens into gold. If you have had days when you felt you were carrying too much, you might like this image, a heavy weight set down on water, finally supported. And as the barge travels, the workers on board do not need to force the river to hurry. They only need to keep the boat aligned, to watch for shallow places, to listen to the language of current and breeze. There is a lesson in that too. Sometimes we don't need to push ourselves forward. Sometimes we only need to keep ourselves gently aligned with what is already moving. Now, when the granite reaches the building site, whether it is a pyramid field, a temple precinct, or a hidden chamber like the one we visited, another kind of work begins. Smoothing, polishing, the slow art of making something hard feel calm. A slab of granite can become so even that lamplight glides across it like moonlight on a lake. And in a space underground where the air is cool and the sounds are small, that kind of surface changes the mind. It tells the mind, you are safe here. Nothing will jump at you. Nothing will demand quickness. That is why when people today describe certain ancient stonework, they sometimes reach for the same word again and again, mirror. Smooth as a mirror. And perhaps you can feel why that matters for sleep. When your mind is anxious, it looks for edges, sharp corners, unfinished questions, sudden turns. But a smooth surface invites the mind to slide, not to snag. It invites you to drift. So, as we return in imagination to our quiet chamber, notice how the polished stone seems to soften the air itself. Even the light feels gentler when it falls on something that does not resist it. Now, let's sit beside the sealed vessel again. We will not open it. Not yet. Instead, we will listen to what surrounds it, the layers of time that gathered above it, the hands that shaped the room, the thoughts that once filled it. And here we touch a gentle idea from ancient Egypt, one that does not need to be heavy to be deep. The Egyptians spoke of life as more than the visible body. They imagined a kind of presence, an essence, that could linger like warmth in a blanket after someone stands up. They called it by different names in different contexts, but tonight we can hold the simplest feeling of it, that a person is not only flesh and bone, but also breath, memory, and quiet influence. If you have ever walked into a room and felt the calm of someone who is not there anymore, a parent, a friend, a beloved voice, then you already understand this idea without needing any lecture. A presence can remain. And so, in these chambers, the Egyptians crafted spaces meant to hold presence gently, the way a jar holds perfume, the way a song holds emotion. But history is not only stone and belief, it is also color. Let me show you a color that feels like an exhale. Imagine a blue, soft, mineral, slightly dusty, like a piece of sky that has decided to become tangible. This blue was made long ago in workshops where heat and time were treated like ingredients. Today we sometimes call it Egyptian blue. In torchlight, it can look muted, like twilight. On a wall, it can look like a calm promise that even in a tomb, even underground, the sky is remembered. And here is a small, sweet discovery. This blue can hold light in a way the eye doesn't always notice, as if it keeps a quiet glow for those who know how to listen. I like that. A color that glows softly even when it seems still. Because that is what you are doing right now in your own way. Glowing softly from inside, even as the world outside becomes quiet. In modern times, people have found new ways to listen to stone without breaking it. And I want to mention this gently, like placing a feather on the palm. They use a kind of seeing that feels almost like a lullaby of physics. Not a loud machine, not an invasive force, but a patient method that allows tiny travelers from the sky to pass through rock and sketch what lies within. Some call it moon scanning, but you don't need the word. You only need the image, a silent rain of invisible visitors falling from above, passing through stone the way moonlight passes through a thin curtain, and leaving behind a soft suggestion of hidden spaces. A map made without shouting. When I think of that, I think of the way your own thoughts pass through you at night. Some thoughts are heavy and knock at the door, but others drift through like faint light. And you don't have to chase them. You can let them pass. Now we have gathered enough calm pieces to return to our sealed vessel with a different kind of readiness. Not the readiness of excitement, the readiness of trust. Trust that we can learn without strain. Trust that history can be soothing. Trust that even mysteries can be held gently, like a sleeping cat in your lap. And here, in the lantern's glow, I noticed something I did not notice before. Near the edge of the chamber, half hidden by shadow, there is a small wooden shape. Not large, not dramatic, just the curved suggestion of a plank, the kind you might find on a boat. It looks impossibly well preserved, as if it has been waiting for the right moment to be seen. A piece of wood in a world of stone. And suddenly the Nile feels closer again. Because if there is wood here, then there may be a story of a journey. A journey meant for someone who believed that even after death, there would be travel. In the next part, we will follow that wooden curve into a deeper, quieter wonder. A boat that slept for thousands of years, holding the scent of cedar like a secret kept under sand. Following it, you may let your eyelids grow heavier, as if the river itself is rocking you. For a moment, we keep our lantern low, so the chamber can remain what it is. A cool pocket of silence beneath that sunlit sand. The sealed stone still rests in the center, patient and closed, like a thought that does not require an answer tonight. But our attention drifts softly, naturally, toward that small curve of wood near the wall. Wood is a tender thing in a land of heat. It is the kind of material that remembers every touch. It carries scent, it carries grain, it carries, even after many years, the gentle idea of a living tree. In the dimness, the plank looks almost unreal, as if the desert has been keeping it the way a careful hand keeps a letter, folded, protected, and hidden from wind. If you lean closer in your imagination, you might notice the faint warmth of color in it, not bright, but honeyed, like tea steeped for a long time. And the thought arrives without hurry: if this wood is here, then there was once a boat, not a dramatic boat, not a vessel of storms, a boat of ritual and patience, built for a journey that moves at the speed of the sun across the sky. Long ago along the Nile, boats were not only transportation, they were a way of understanding the world. They taught people how to trust what holds them. They taught people how to move without forcing. They taught people how to arrive. I want you to imagine a quiet shipyard near the river. It is early, the light is pale, the air smells like damp reeds and fresh-cut wood. Men and women speak in low voices, not because they are afraid, but because morning asks for softness. Cedar arrives from far away, carried over water, traded gently from coast to river. Cedar is a generous wood, aromatic, sturdy, resistant to time. Even now, when you open an old cedar chest, the scent can rise like a memory. In ancient Egypt, cedar was a kind of luxury that still felt natural because it came from the living world. A carpenter runs his palm along a board, testing its smoothness. Another ties rope with patient fingers, as if the knots are small prayers. No one is in a rush. The river will still be there when the boat is ready. And then, in a different dawn, one that belongs to a different century, this boat is brought to rest near a pyramid, not to be used in daily life, but to be kept carefully as if someone is tucking a vessel into sleep. You may have heard of a pharaoh named Khufu. His pyramid, the Great Pyramid, still stands with a kind of quiet authority, as though time has been circling it without finding a reason to disturb it. Near that pyramid, in the modern era, a great wooden boat was discovered, taken apart into many pieces, laid down and hidden, as if the desert itself was asked to guard it. When people first began to bring the pieces into the light again, they did it slowly. They did it the way you would handle an old photograph. They did it the way you would hold a sleeping child. And something tender happened. As the wood met air after so long, it released a faint fragrance, cedar and dryness and ancient resin, like a soft breath that had been held for centuries. Even thinking about it, you can feel the gentleness of that moment. Not a shout of discovery. A quiet opening. A scent rising, then fading like the end of a lullaby. If you want, let your own breath mimic it. In, slowly. Out, softly. As if you are letting a sealed room inside you open, just enough to feel lighter. Now imagine the boat itself, not as a museum object, but as a living shape. Long and elegant, its lines curved like a smile. Its planks fit together with calm precision. Its ropes are arranged with care. It is not built to fight the river, it is built to float with it. In the stories the Egyptians told, the sun was not only a light in the sky, it was a traveler. It rose, crossed, and set. It moved through the day as if the day were a river. And at night, the sun continued its journey through a darker water, an unseen channel, so it could return again. A solar boat, then, was not simply a boat. It was a promise that cycles continue, that endings are not abrupt, that darkness is not the opposite of light, but a passage the light knows how to cross. If you have ever reached the end of a long day and worried that you will not feel like yourself again in the morning, this idea can be comforting. The morning does return, not by force, by rhythm. Tonight, sleep is your solar boat. It does not need a perfect mind to carry you. It does not need a solved life. It only needs your willingness to lie down inside it and let it float. You might notice that as you picture the boat, the sounds in your imagination become softer. There is the hush of water against wood. There is the faint creak of rope. There is the distant call of a bird that does not demand attention. And perhaps you can answer my earlier question in a new way. If you are in the dark, what Nile River sound would help you slow your breathing right now? Maybe it is the gentle dip of an oar. Maybe it is water running along the hull in a steady line. Maybe it is the quiet rhythm of a boat gliding past reeds, making them whisper together. Choose one sound, let it repeat. Let it be a metronome that does not count time, only eases it. In a modern museum, the solar boat rests under soft lights. Visitors walk around it slowly, often without speaking. The room itself seems to ask for quiet. Dust motes drift through the air like tiny lanterns. And the boat, though it is still, feels as if it remembers motion. Sometimes history feels like a list of facts, but sometimes history feels like this, a shape that holds meaning without explanation. A vessel that says simply, someone cared enough to prepare a gentle journey. And that care can reach you even now across all the years, because you too have prepared for journeys, you have packed lunches, you have charged phones, you have carried keys and kept schedules and made your way through crowds. You have done so much just to move from one part of life to the next. So let this be your permission to do something simpler, to be carried. If your thoughts wander, that is all right. Let them wander like small boats untied from shore. They can drift, they can return, they can disappear into the wide dark without causing harm. Sometimes I like to imagine the boat on the Nile at dusk, long before it was taken apart and laid to rest. The heat of the day is leaving. The river darkens to a deeper blue, the color of ink in a shallow bowl. A small lamp is lit on board, steady and modest, and the faces of the rowers glow for a moment, then soften back into shadow. No one speaks much. Not because there is sorrow, but because the river already knows the route. The oars enter the water with a simple rhythm: dip, draw, lift. Like a breathing practice, the body can follow without thinking. Each stroke is a quiet promise that the boat will keep moving, and the night will keep opening. Above, the first stars appear one by one, as if the sky is turning pages. If you watch long enough, you can feel how time becomes gentler when you stop demanding it. If your mind is still listing what you did, what you missed, what you must remember, let the imagined boat teach you something calm. Movement can be slow and still be real. And when the boat was found again in modern times, the people who worked with it did not treat it like a trophy. They treated it like a sleeping thing. They brought each piece into quiet rooms with clean, gentle light. They brushed away dust with careful strokes. They paused, listening for the faintest creak, the way you listen to a house settling at night. There is comfort in that image, modern hands moving slowly, honoring ancient hands. No argument, no rush, only care. If you are listening after a long day, you may recognize that kind of care as something you rarely receive in bulk. Usually care arrives in small portions: a warm drink, a kind message, a clean pillowcase, a few minutes without notifications. Tonight, let this story be one more portion, small, steady, enough. And if a thought comes to you, something unfinished, imagine placing it on the boat as well. Not to lose it, just to let it rest on the wooden deck under starlight while you stop holding it so tightly. The river can carry it for a while. You can pick it up tomorrow if you want. Or you can let it drift a little farther until it feels lighter. Now, as our lantern glow returns to the underground chamber, we notice something else, tucked near the wooden curve. A small trace of color on stone, faint like dried sky. A blue that does not shout, a blue that seems to wait for the right kind of light. It is only a hint, only a whisper of pigment. But it suggests that someone once wanted this place to remember the heavens, even here underground. And it makes me wonder what other quiet lights are hidden in the dark. Lights the eye cannot see at first, but the heart can sense. In the next part, we will follow this gentle blue deeper into the story. We will learn how the ancient world kept color like a secret lullaby, how a shade made long ago can still glow softly, as if it never stopped dreaming. Let us follow that faint trace of color, the one resting on stone like a remembered piece of sky. In the underground chamber, the lantern's light is modest. It does not flood the room. It simply offers a warm circle, and within that circle the pale limestone looks soft, almost chalky, as if it could be rubbed between fingers. But near the edge, where the wooden curve waits in shadow, there is a thin smear of blue, hardly more than a breath of pigment. It isn't the bright blue of a screen, it isn't the loud blue of a billboard. It is a quiet blue, dusty and calm, like twilight that has settled onto the world and decided to stay. If you want, Let your eyelids relax a little more now. You don't have to see the blue clearly, just let the idea of it exist. A small patch of sky tucked underground, protected from the sun. Long ago, the people of Egypt knew how to keep the sky close. They lived under a vast ceiling of stars, and they learned the patient habit of noticing. They noticed how dawn arrived, how it softened the edges of sand. They noticed how the river reflected light like a long mirror. They noticed how the night carried constellations that returned again and again as reliably as breath. And somewhere between noticing and making, they found a way to create a color that felt like the Nile at noon and the heavens at dusk. Today we call it Egyptian blue, but the name doesn't matter as much as the feeling, a calm shade that seems to belong to both water and air. Imagine a small workshop near the river, shaded by a roof of woven reeds. The air is warm but not harsh. On a low table lie bowls of crushed stone, pale sand, and powders that look like the earth itself ground into memory. A potter turns a clay vessel in slow circles. A painter stirs a mixture, patient, as if stirring a quiet soup. Nearby, a kiln breathes heat, not a roaring furnace, but a steady, contained warmth, the kind of heat that asks for time. The artisans feed it carefully, watching the color of the fire, listening to its mood the way one listens to wind. To make a color that lasts, you do not rush. You wait. You adjust. You learn the rhythm of temperature and patience. Outside the workshop, the Nile moves, calm and generous. A boat glides by, its sails slack in a mild breeze. Someone laughs softly on the far bank, and the sound travels only part way before it dissolves into air. This is how I like to imagine ancient knowledge, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet daily practice. A person wakes, a person works, a person learns, and the learning becomes something the world can hold. You may be listening from an apartment high above a street where cars pass like restless insects. Maybe the glow of a phone still lingers on the bedside table, and the day's conversations echo faintly. Let that modern glow soften. Let it become like lamplight in a museum, steady, dim, forgiving. The people who mixed this blue also had long days and tired minds. They too needed evening. They too trusted night to restore them quietly. When the blue is ready, it is painted onto walls, onto carvings, onto small objects meant to be handled with care. In tombs, it becomes a sky under stone. In temples, it becomes water made visible. It offers the mind a familiar calm. Even here, even underground, the world remembers light. And here is the soft discovery that makes the color feel almost alive. Somewhere in its nature, this blue can hold a hidden glow. Under certain kinds of light that our eyes do not use in daily life, it can shine back gently, as if it is answering a question you did not know you asked. I want to speak of this the way we speak of a lullaby, simply. Imagine a modern laboratory, quiet and clean, where the lights are soft and the voices are low. A wall fragment from an ancient site rests on a padded table. It looks dull at first, like a faded painting, like a memory left too long in sun. A scientist, more listener than conqueror, brings his small instrument close. Perhaps it is a camera that sees a different kind of light, a light beyond the ordinary. The room remains calm, no alarms, no drama, and then, on a screen, the blue appears as if waking up, not bright, not flashing, just present, like a gentle lantern lit behind a curtain. It is a strange comfort, isn't it? The idea that something can glow quietly even when it seems asleep. If you have ever felt like your own brightness faded over the years, if you have ever wondered where your earlier spark went, this ancient blue offers a kind reply. Some light is not gone. It is simply resting in a spectrum you haven't been looking at. Tonight, you do not have to perform your light. You only have to exist with it. Now let us return to the underground chamber again, the one where stone feels cool and smooth. The blue smear on the wall is still faint, still modest. But knowing what we know now, it feels like a small sign. The ancient world left quiet signals for those who arrive gently. And when we think of signals, we can think of another modern way of listening, one that does not break stone, does not pry, does not force. We mentioned it earlier like a feather, a silent kind of seeing that can look through rock the way a calm gaze looks through fog. In certain places, scientists have allowed invisible travelers from the sky to pass through ancient structures, counting them patiently, letting their paths suggest what the eye cannot. It is almost like letting rain fall on a roof and listening from the pattern of sound to where the beams are. Again, no need for the details. Only the mood, a gentle investigation, as soft as a hand resting on a door to feel if the room behind it is warm. When you combine these two ideas, blue that glows quietly, and seeing that listens without harm, something tender happens in the mind. History becomes less like a locked chest and more like a sleeping house. You don't break in, you don't shout through the windows, you simply stand outside, breathe, and notice the small signs of life, a soft light behind a curtain, a faint warmth near the wall. And as you notice, you begin to feel your own nervous system settle, because your mind, too, is a house full of rooms. Some are bright and active, some are dark and closed, some contain old memories you don't open often. That is all right. You do not have to open every room tonight. You can let some doors remain gently closed, the way ancient doors remained closed for centuries without harm. You can let unanswered questions rest. You can let unfinished tasks sleep like boats pulled onto shore. If a thought arrives that tries to demand your attention, you can do something simple. Imagine painting it with a soft wash of Egyptian blue, as if covering it with twilight. Not to erase it, but to calm its edges. And if you want a small ritual right now, you can return to sound. What Nile River sound would you choose tonight to slow your breathing? The hush of water on mud? The whisper of reeds? The quiet knock of a wooden hull against a dock? Pick one. Let it repeat. And as it repeats, allow your breath to match it. Steady, unhurried, kind. Now in the chamber, our lantern reveals something else near the blue smear. A tiny fleck of dust that catches the light and drifts. It floats down as if the air itself is moving in slow motion. That drifting dust reminds me of another truth about time. Time is not always a rush forward. Sometimes it is a settling. Sometimes it is dust choosing where to rest. In the ancient world, people built for that kind of time. They built for centuries. They built for silence. They built for the idea that the future would arrive like morning eventually, without needing to be forced. And in the modern world, you are asked to build days quickly. You are asked to respond, to produce, to keep moving. So tonight, let us do the opposite. Let us build a moment slowly. Let us place one calm image on top of another. The Nile at dawn, the barge carrying granite, the workshop shading bowls of pigment, the blue glow waking quietly on a screen, the underground chamber holding its cool breath. One image at a time, like stacking soft cloth until the mind feels warm. And now, as we linger with the blue, a new, gentle curiosity begins to form, like the beginning of a dream. If the ancient artists left hidden light in their pigment, and modern listeners can see without harming stone, then what might still be waiting behind the sealed vessel in the center of the chamber? Not in a sensational way, in a quiet, patient way. Perhaps it is not a treasure meant to impress. Perhaps it is a message meant to soothe, a reminder that humans have always sought continuity, softness, and meaning. Our lantern flickers once, not sharply, just enough to make the shadows breathe, and in that small shift of light the seal's edge looks slightly different, as if a thin line has been traced there, almost like writing, a line that might be a name, or a prayer, or a simple mark of care. We will not rush to read it. We will only let the possibilities settle into the room like dust. In the next part, we will move closer to that line, and we will listen for what it says, quietly, patiently, like listening to the Nile in the dark. We move closer, not with the urgency of solving anything, but with the quiet tenderness of reading a familiar page before sleep. The line along the seal is so fine that it almost seems imagined. Yet when the lantern shifts, the edge catches light in a soft arc, and the thin incision becomes real. It is not a crack, it is not damage, it is a deliberate mark made by a hand that wanted to leave a gentle certainty behind. In ancient Egypt, a name was not only a label, a name was a kind of shelter. To speak it was to keep someone present. To carve it was to give that presence a home that could outlast weather, outlast footsteps, outlast the changing of languages. So it makes sense that the seal would carry a name. We lean in and the stone feels cooler, as if it is holding a long night inside it. The air in the chamber is steady. The sound of our breathing becomes part of the room, soft and rhythmic, like water moving under a bridge. If your own mind is still busy, let it rest its weight here for a moment. Let it lean with us. Let it focus on something small and harmless, a line in stone, a curve of shadow, the gentle glow of the lantern. The marks on the seal are not arranged like modern letters. They are shapes, quiet pictures, each one chosen carefully. A reed, a ripple, a tiny bird, a seated figure. The kind of symbols that do not demand you translate quickly. They invite you to look, and in looking, you slow down. This is one reason hieroglyphs feel comforting to me. They are language that behaves like art. Even when you do not know what they say, you can feel their intention to preserve, to honor, to make the invisible slightly more held. Long ago, there were people who devoted their lives to this holding, scribes, quiet workers of ink and patience. They did not carry stone on their backs, they carried attention. They learned how to listen to language the way a musician listens to rhythm. They learned how to keep records, prayers, names and stories steady on papyrus, on wood, on clay, on walls. Imagine one of them for a moment. He rises before the sun has lifted. The air is still cool. He washes his hands, not out of fear, but out of habit. Clean hands for careful work. He sits on a low stool. A palette lies beside him, small wells of pigment, one dark like night, another red like warm clay. He moistens the brush with a few drops of water, and the brush becomes alive, ready to make fine lines. When he writes, he does not rush. He lets each stroke land with intention, as if the page can feel his mood. Outside, the river is awake and moving. Inside, the room is quiet enough to hear the faint scratch of fiber against brush. Sometimes, when modern life is loud, I like to remember that sound, the slow scratch of a brush, the soft tap of a reed pen, the calm certainty of a hand doing one thing at a time. There is a small kindness in imagining that scribe because it gives our own modern minds permission to simplify. We live surrounded by names in emails, meeting invites, labels, and tiny glowing screens. Sometimes the mind begins to feel as if it is made of lists, but here, in this chamber of stone, a name is not a demand, it is an offering. If you like, imagine your own name written slowly, not in a hurried signature, but in a calm hand that takes its time. Imagine it resting on a page the way a leaf rests on water. You do not have to prove anything to that name tonight. You only have to inhabit it gently. Let it be enough that you are here, breathing, while history keeps watch in the dark tonight. If you want to borrow that certainty now, let your breath do one thing at a time as well. In, gently, out, softly. Now, back at the seal, we follow the carved line as if tracing it with the eyes is a form of respect. It leads us to a small cartouche-like frame, an oval enclosure that seems to cradle the name. The stone around it is smooth, the carving shallow but clear, like a whisper preserved, a name inside a protective loop. There is something quietly human about that, this desire to keep what matters enclosed and safe. In Egyptian thought, memory was not only personal, it was communal. It was a kind of nourishment. To be remembered was to continue, to be forgotten was to fade. So they built and wrote and painted and sang, all as ways of keeping each other from disappearing too completely. And perhaps that is why these places still affect us, because we too want to be held. We too want proof that our days are more than a blur of errands and screens. We too hope that something of us will remain. If not in stone, then in the softness we leave behind. A kind word, a patient gesture, a steady presence for someone else. Here, no one rests alone, I said earlier. It is true in this chamber too. The past rests with us and we rest with it. The carved symbols on the seal seem to suggest a simple offering, protection for the one inside and protection for the memory of their name. The exact translation can wait. Tonight, we do not need to force meaning into our minds. Meaning can arrive the way dawn arrives, slowly without sharp edges. Still, there is one symbol that feels especially tender, a small curve that resembles water. Water in a tomb. Water in a chamber of stone. A reminder that life is always imagined as flowing, even when everything looks still. And that returns us again, gently, to the Nile. Let the Nile sound you chose earlier return now. The hush against the bank. The whisper through reeds. The soft knock of a hull against wood. Let it play inside your imagination and allow your breathing to match it. As we listen, we notice something else near the seal, something so modest that it could be missed if you were in a hurry. A faint glimmer at the edge of the vessel's lid. Not a bright flash. Just a suggestion that the stone has been touched by a different material, perhaps a thin inlay, perhaps the residue of an ancient fastening. It is a soft kind of suspense, the kind that feels like noticing a star appear in the sky. You do not gasp, you simply watch and feel the night widen. In the ancient world, metals carried meanings the way colors did. Gold was the sun made solid. Copper could be warmth and utility. And silver, rarer in Egypt than gold, could feel like moonlight, cool and quiet, a metal that belonged to night. There were times and places where silver appeared like a calm miracle, not because it shouted wealth, but because it suggested distance, trade, and long routes across water and desert. Silver had traveled, silver had crossed horizons. I mention this because our story is slowly preparing to travel as well, not away from the Nile, but outward, along the lines of connection that tied different regions, different dynasties, different centuries together. Egypt is not one single moment, it is a long river of moments. Sometimes bright, sometimes quiet, always moving. And somewhere farther north, in the marshy quiet of the delta, there was a city whose name feels like a soft rustle. Tanis. Tanis was a place of canals and damp air, of reeds and shifting ground, a different kind of Egypt from the crisp desert tombs. It held its own secrets in wet soil, as if the land itself preferred to keep things cool and hidden. In Tanis, long after the builders of the Great Pyramid had become legend, a pharaoh was laid to rest with an unusual kind of care that shimmered with a pale lunar beauty. His name was Susenes, and in the modern imagination he sometimes becomes the Silver Pharaoh because of what was found with him. But we will not jump there yet. Tonight we only let the idea of silver enter our chamber like moonlight entering through a crack in a door, a thin light, a calm hint. Back beside the seal, the glimmer at the lid's edge seems a little alive now that we have imagined moonlight as metal. Our lantern does not make it shine, it simply makes it visible enough to wonder. Wonder in a sleep story is never a shove, it is a hand offered. You may take it or you may rest. And if you are resting, you can let the name on the seal do its gentle work. Even without reading it, you can feel what it was meant to do, to keep someone safe in the dark, to keep their story from scattering like dust. If tonight's story is soothing you, let your body accept that without analysis. Let your eyelids grow heavier if they want to. Let your thoughts blur at the edges. You do not have to stay alert to honor history. Sometimes the best way to honor it is to let it calm you. We remain in the chamber a little longer, listening to the imagined river and the real rhythm of breath. The blue on the wall is still there, faint and sleeping. The wood curve is still there, patient as a shoreline. And the sealed vessel rests, holding its name like a lullaby. In the next part, our gentle journey will drift toward the delta, toward wet earth and quiet canals, and toward that pale metal that feels like moonlight, so we can meet the Silver Pharaoh, not with excitement, but with the same respect we bring to sleep. We leave the deep chamber the way we leave a quiet thought, without slamming the door. Step by step, the corridor rises, the air warms by a gentle degree. The lantern's glow becomes less necessary, and then, at last, we are back under open sky, where the morning has matured into a soft, steady light. If you are listening at night, keep the image anyway. Let the sunlight be symbolic, not literal. Let it stand for clarity that doesn't pressure you, for brightness that doesn't demand you do anything at all. Now our map turns north. The Nile, which began as a narrow thread far to the south, becomes wider as it approaches the sea. It slows, it spreads, it learns how to divide itself into many channels, the way a calm mind can hold many thoughts without clenching any of them. This is the delta. Along the banks, white egrets stand like commas in the grass, perfectly still. A fisherman's boat drifts without oars, guided by current alone. From a distant village, a faint morning prayer floats across water, then fades, leaving only hush for you to breathe. Here the land is softer, the air carries more moisture, the horizon feels lower, not because the sky is smaller, but because reeds and water reshape the way distance looks. Birds skim over the surface in lazy arcs. The scent of wet earth rises like a quiet perfume, familiar and grounding. Imagine walking along a canal at dawn. The water is dark, almost black, and it reflects the pale sky as if the sky has been poured into it. Reeds murmur together when a breeze passes. Somewhere, unseen, a frog makes a single, gentle sound, and then stillness returns. If your day has been full of hard edges, deadlines, sharp conversations, bright screens, this landscape offers the opposite. Everything here is rounded. Everything here is softened by water, and that is why I wanted to bring you to Tanis. Tanis was an ancient city in the northeastern delta, a place of canals and temples, of damp ground that keeps secrets differently than dry sand. In the desert, things are preserved by dryness. In the delta, they are preserved by coolness and mud, by the slow sealing power of wet earth. For a long time, Tanis slept under that earth, not erased, only quiet. And when it began to be uncovered in modern times, the discoveries did not feel like fireworks. They felt like careful unwrapping, like the slow opening of a drawer that hasn't been touched in generations. In that unwrapping, people came upon a tomb that belonged to a pharaoh named Susenes. His name is not as famous as Khufu's, and that is almost part of his gentleness. He lived in a later age when the center of power shifted, when Egypt's story was changing its rhythm. Yet his resting place held a quiet beauty that still surprises the modern heart. Because in his tomb there was silver, not a little silver, not a single bead, but a coffin made of silver, cool, pale, and luminous in the way moonlight can be luminous. In Egypt, gold was more common than silver. Gold came from nearby deserts and mines, a sun metal that felt native to the landscape. Silver often had to travel. It arrived through trade and connection, through routes that crossed water and foreign coasts, through relationships that stretched beyond the horizon. So when you imagine a silver coffin in the delta, you can imagine more than wealth. You can imagine distance, you can imagine ships in the Mediterranean, their sails full in a salt wind. You can imagine the long patience of exchange, hands weighing, agreeing, trusting. And then you can imagine that metal traveling inland, moving from hand to hand like a quiet promise, until it becomes something intimate, a shelter for one person's last sleep. In the tomb, the silver did not blaze, it did not shout. It held the lantern's glow gently, the way a calm face holds a small smile. The metal's surface, slightly darkened by time, still suggested a softness, like a moon seen through thin cloud. If you have ever stood outside on a quiet night and watched moonlight lie on a street, you know the feeling. Moonlight doesn't push itself into your eyes. It rests, it cools. It makes everything feel slower and more forgiving. That is what I want you to feel now, the idea of moonlight turned into a vessel, a quiet container of rest. We step into the imagined tomb with the same care we used before. The air is cooler here, not as crisp as the desert's coolness, but damp cool, like a cellar where old stories are stored. The scent is different too, earthier, deeper, more like wet stone than dry sand. Our lantern glows, the walls are close, and then there it is. The silver coffin, resting within a larger stone setting, as if silver itself has been nested inside limestone for safety. We do not stare. We do not rush. We simply let the image settle. In slowly, out softly. Notice how your body responds to the thought of cool metal. Sometimes even an image can lower the inner temperature of the mind, the way a cold cloth on the forehead can quiet a feverish thought. Now let's speak gently about why this matters. When people prepared a burial, they were not only preparing for death. They were preparing for continuity. They were preparing for a journey that could be imagined as a river crossing, a night passage, a return. That is why the solar boat mattered. That is why the sky blue pigment mattered. That is why names mattered. And that is why perhaps the silver pharaoh matters too, not because silver is rare, but because the choice of silver is a kind of poetry. Gold is day, silver is night. Gold is warmth, silver is coolness. Gold is sunlight on stone, silver is moonlight on water. In the delta, where water is everywhere, moonlight feels at home. So in this quiet chamber, you can imagine Susenes's coffin as a piece of moon placed gently in the earth, so that the night would have something familiar to hold. If you are listening from darkness, let that be comforting. You are not only in the dark, you are in a place that can be held by gentle light. Even if your room is unlit, even if your eyes are closed, the mind can still sense a kind of moonlight, soft, steady, kind. And if the mind begins to wander, let it wander through the delta's channels. Let your thoughts split into smaller streams, each one carrying less weight. A canal does not have to be deep to be real. A thought does not have to be loud to be true. Now I want to return, briefly, to the idea of connection. A silver coffin in Egypt is a reminder that ancient civilizations were not isolated islands. They were coastlines. Touching, they traded materials and ideas. The Nile flowed north, and the sea opened outward, and people followed those waters with hope. Perhaps that is one reason you feel drawn to history at night, because it reminds you that your life, too, is part of a long network of human striving and human tenderness. You are not alone in your fatigue. You are not the only one who needs a quiet place to rest. Here, no one rests alone. In the tomb, the silver coffin keeps its composure. It reflects our lantern in a dim halo, like a small moon trapped in a room. And yet, even in this calm beauty, there is a gentle question that rises, soft, not sharp. How did such a rare metal arrive here in such quantity, in such a personal form? The answer is not a single sentence. It is a web of roots and relationships. It is also trust. Trust that a partner will return, trust that a river will carry, trust that the world is connected enough for a dream to become material. If you want, let that idea become a reassurance. Even when you cannot see the full route, there may still be a path forming. Now, as we stand beside the silver, we hear something faint, so faint it could be imagined. A sound like water. Not the Nile's broad, confident sound, but a smaller water sound. A drip somewhere, a distant canal moving, the delta's damp breath. The tomb itself seems to remember that it is near water, that the land around it is always whispering moisture into stone. And this brings us back to your breathing again. If the listener is in the dark, what Nile River sound would you play to slow down their breathing immediately? Perhaps tonight it is not the wave against a bank, but the tiny, steady drip in a cool chamber, one drop at a time, patient, unwavering. Drop. Pause. Drop. Pause. A rhythm that asks the body to follow without thinking. Let your exhale lengthen to match it. Drop and out. Pause and in. Drop and out. Pause and in. In that rhythm, the silver coffin becomes less an object and more a feeling. Coolness, quietness, continuity. And now, because this is a sleep story, we allow a soft cliffhanger to appear like a star. Near the silver there are other objects. Small, careful items placed with intention. A bracelet, a fragment of linen, a carved amulet. Each one a whisper of someone's hand, someone's care. And among these there is something that suggests a bigger story still. Something that hints at far horizons, at trade routes, so long they feel like myths. A small container, sealed. A residue, perhaps. A scent that does not belong only to the Nile. We do not open it tonight. We only notice it the way we noticed the blue on the wall, the way we noticed the line on a seal. We let it rest, and we let curiosity remain gentle. Because the best mysteries for sleep are the ones that do not demand you stay awake. They simply glow, like moonlight on water, like silver in the dark. Stay with me in the cool chamber of Tanis, where the air is damp and quiet, and the lantern makes a small halo on silver. The coffin of Susenes rests like moonlight given a body, pale, calm, and patient. Around it, the smaller objects sit the way pebbles sit on a riverbed, each one in its place, each one shaped by care. We do not hurry past them, because sometimes the smallest objects carry the gentlest kind of wonder. Near the edge of a stone shelf, tucked where a hand could reach without ceremony, There is a little container, no larger than something you might hold between your thumb and 2 fingers. It has a lid fitted with surprising precision. The surface looks dull, not because it is unimportant, but because time has softened everything it touches. In the lantern light, the container does not gleam, it simply exists. And yet the moment we notice it, the mind begins to do what minds do. It leans forward a fraction. Not into anxiety, into curiosity that feels like warmth. If you are listening in the dark and your thoughts are beginning to drift, let them drift here, toward this tiny, quiet vessel. There is no danger in wondering softly. Wonder can be a lullaby if it moves slowly enough. Imagine a careful hand, long ago, placing this container beside the coffin. The hand is calm, the gesture is practiced. There is no sense of panic in it, only devotion. Perhaps the person placing it whispers a short phrase, something like a blessing, something like a farewell. Then the lid is set, the tomb is closed, and the world continues above. Centuries pass. Water moves through reeds. Winds shift. The delta breathes damp air into the ground, and the little container waits, sealed, protected, like a held breath. When modern hands finally meet it again, the first action is not opening. The first action is listening, a careful touch, a glance, a pause, because modern researchers, at their best, behave like gentle visitors. They do not burst into rooms, they stand at thresholds, they let their eyes adjust, they let the story introduce itself. Sometimes they take a small sample, not to consume it, not to claim it, but simply to understand what kind of world it came from, what kind of scent it held, what kind of journey it implies. And that is where the soft mystery widens. In some cases, when scientists have examined ancient remains, wrappings, resins, the quiet chemistry that lingers in hair and skin, they have found traces that raise delicate questions. Not conclusions, questions. A whisper of something that sounds too modern. A hint of an unfamiliar plant. A suggestion that the web of ancient trade might have been wider than we usually imagine. There is a famous example people sometimes mention, reports of nicotine and cocaine detected in some mummies, but tonight we will not treat that like a headline. We will treat it like what it really is, a question that sits on a table and waits for patience. Because there are many possibilities in a world as old and as connected as this one. Sometimes a trace is real, carried by trade routes that moved not only metal and cedar, but leaves, seeds, and medicines. Sometimes a trace is the echo of another plant, a local herb that resembles something we name differently today. Sometimes a trace is the result of handling, of storage, of modern contamination that arrives quietly without anyone meaning harm. And sometimes the truth is simply unfinished, still being tested, still being debated, still held in the careful hands of people who prefer evidence to drama. What matters for our story is not the certainty, it is the softness of the question. Because a question can be a bridge between Tanis and distant coasts, between a silver coffin and a salt wind, between a quiet jar and the wide world beyond the horizon. So let's step onto that bridge gently. Imagine the Mediterranean at night. Not the loud Mediterranean of crowded ports, but the ancient sea under stars. The water is dark, and the sky is darker, and the boundary between them is only a thin line of hush. A ship moves across the surface, not fast, not slow, steady. Its sail is a pale shape against the night. On deck, a small oil lamp flickers behind a shielded lantern frame, so the light does not travel too far. The sailors speak in low voices. The sea asks for quiet. The wind is enough sound. Below deck, in the dimness, there are jars, bundles, coils of rope, stacks of wood, perhaps a small pouch of herbs tied with linen, Perhaps a resin that smells sweet and warm, like honey mixed with pine. Trade in the ancient world was not only about profit, it was about connection. It was about learning what grew where, what healed, what soothed, what preserved. A fragrant resin could travel from a distant hillside to an Egyptian temple where it would become incense. A spice could travel from a far shore to a kitchen where it would become comfort. A pigment could travel from one region to another, carrying a piece of sky across borders. And silver, cool and pale, could travel too, becoming moonlight set into metal. When you imagine these roots, you can feel how small objects become evidence of a larger tenderness, human beings reaching outward, not always in conquest, sometimes simply in curiosity and need. If you have ever ordered something online and watched it move across invisible lines, city to city, warehouse to doorstep, then you already understand, in a modern way, the ancient feeling the world is connected by paths we do not always see. But the ancient paths were slower. A ship waited for wind, a caravan waited for cool hours of morning, a barge waited for a steady current. Waiting was part of the system, and waiting is what we are practicing tonight. Let the waiting soothe you. Let your breath imitate a sail that fills and relaxes, in, and the sail rounds gently, out, and it softens again. Now come back with me to the Delta tomb. The little sealed container sits beside the silver. It does not announce what it holds. But if you lean close in imagination, you might sense a suggestion of scent, faint, almost ghost-like, a sweetness, a dryness, a warmth. It reminds me of another kind of preservation in ancient Egypt, linen. Linen was everywhere, soft, breathable, pale as sand in shade. It wrapped bodies, it covered bread, it carried goods, it held writing. It was a fabric that belonged to daily life and to ritual, to the living and to the dead. If you picture a bolt of linen being unrolled, you can almost hear the soft rasp of fibers. You can imagine the way it feels cool at first touch, then warms against skin. And sometimes linen carried more than touch. It carried language. There are stories, quiet ones, about fragments of linen covered in writing that traveled far from Egypt, across seas, across years, ending up in places the original writer never imagined. It is another reminder, history moves like water. It does not stay in one basin, it spills gently into others. Tonight, I do not want to pull you into complicated debates. I only want to let these ideas settle like silt, slowly, peacefully. A sealed jar suggests fragrance and medicine. A trace in a wrapping suggests trade and contact. A line of writing suggests a voice that traveled. And all of it suggests a world that was never as isolated as we sometimes picture. Which brings us back to you. You too carry traces, not chemical traces, but emotional ones. The tone of a conversation from earlier, the pressure of a responsibility, the warmth of a kindness someone showed you, the taste of coffee that lingered on your tongue, the feeling of a song that stayed in your chest. At night, those traces can feel loud, but they do not have to. You can place them, one by one, into the little container of your mind and close the lid gently for now. You are not throwing them away. You are simply sealing them for the night, the way the Delta sealed its secrets in cool mud, the way the desert sealed a boat in sand. Tomorrow you can open what you need. Tonight you rest. And if you want a sound to help you seal the night, return once more to the Nile. If the listener is in the dark, what Nile river sound would you play to slow down their breathing immediately? Maybe tonight it is the soft pour of water from a jar into a cup, steady, small, soothing. The sound of something being prepared, not urgently, but with care. Let your breathing follow that pour, in as if filling, out as if letting go. Now, before we leave Tanis, there is one more gentle detail. On the damp stone floor, a thin sheen of moisture catches the lantern's glow. It looks almost like a second river, quiet, shallow, hardly moving. The tomb, in its own way, is a canal of memory. It holds what people placed there. It holds their intention. It holds their quiet hope that sleep would not be the end of connection. And as we step back, the silver coffin remains calm and lunar. The small, sealed container remains modest and mysterious. And our curiosity remains, but softened, like a question asked in a whisper. In the next part, we will follow the imagined route of that scent, along coasts and riverbanks, through workshops and storerooms, until it leads us back to the desert again, where another kind of quiet discovery waits beneath stone, a space seen without breaking, a chamber suggested by invisible travelers from the sky. Somewhere above, the canals breathe, and a night breeze brushes palm leaves. You can almost hear them whisper, "Slow, slow, slow tonight," again. For now, let the delta's damp air cool your thoughts. Let moonlight become a blanket. Let the river teach your lungs to slow. If we leave Tanis, we do it the way a boat leaves a reed-lined canal, without a splash, without a sharp turn, only a slow glide into wider water. The delta fades behind us in imagination, the damp air becomes drier, the smell of wet earth softens into the familiar scent of dust warmed by sun. The sky opens up again, broader, clearer, as if the world has taken a deeper breath. And the Nile, always patient, guides us southward along its long, calm spine. Picture the river. At late afternoon now, the light has grown honeyed. The surface is not perfectly still, but it is steady, as if it has learned how to move without hurry. Small boats pass like dark leaves, palm silhouettes lean over the bank. In the distance, the desert begins, pale, quiet, waiting. You may notice as we travel that your own thoughts begin to stretch out and loosen like ropes uncoiling. Something in the idea of a long river calms the mind. The river does not insist on being finished, it only keeps going, and that is enough. Our map returns us to a place where stone dominates again, where the world feels built from geometry and sky, the plateau near Giza. Even if you have never stood there, you can imagine it as a meeting point between two kinds of silence. There is the silence of desert, wide and dry, and there is the silence of stone, dense and cool. Between them, the pyramids rise, less like monuments that shout, more like hills that remember. Now let us arrive at night. Not a tour bus night, not a bright, crowded night, a quiet night, one where the air has cooled and the wind moves like a careful hand. The city lights in the distance glow softly, but here on the plateau, the darkness is generous. Above, the sky is deep. Stars appear in small, patient steps, one after another, until the black is gently freckled with light. The moon may be thin, or it may be absent. Either way, the pyramids remain. Huge shapes made even calmer by darkness, their edges softened, their surfaces turning almost velvety in the night air. If you are listening in bed, you can let this night sky become your ceiling for a moment. Let the stars be slow. Let your breathing become as steady as the horizon. In and out. Somewhere on the plateau, a small team stands quietly with instruments and notebooks, but their mood is not hurried. It is the mood of people entering a library after hours when the building has stopped echoing. They have come to listen to stone. This may sound strange at first, but it becomes gentle when you hold it the right way. Stone has an interior, just as your own mind has an interior. And you do not always need to open a door to sense that there is a room behind it. Sometimes you can feel the temperature change near a wall. Sometimes you can hear the difference in sound when you tap lightly. Sometimes you simply know the way you know a certain memory is behind a certain thought. In recent years, people have used a very quiet method to sense hidden spaces inside great structures, not by drilling, not by cracking, not by forcing, more like watching how invisible visitors pass through. Imagine tiny travelers that arrive from the sky, falling all the time day and night like an unending silent drizzle. You do not feel them, you do not hear them, but they pass through the world, and if you place a patient detector in the right place, you can count them. Where stone is thick, fewer pass. Where there is an empty space, more pass. That is the whole feeling of it. A soft comparison might help. Imagine standing in a room during rain, listening to water on the roof. Under the solid beams, the sound is heavy and muffled. Near a thin panel, it is lighter. Without climbing onto the roof, you can still guess where the structure changes. So the scientists stand in their quiet way and count the sky's invisible drizzle, letting the pyramid reveal itself without injury. And this is where the story becomes gently luminous, because the Great Pyramid, so familiar in outline, so photographed, so studied, still holds a space inside it that was not fully known, a large void suggested by this patient listening. Not a treasure chest, not a trap. Simply a room-like emptiness, a quiet pocket in the stone, an interior silence inside an already silent thing. When I first heard of it, I did not feel excitement the way people feel excitement about secrets. I felt something else, relief. A structure can be enormous, ancient and famous, and still hold a quiet room no one has entered. That means the world still has softness, it still has privacy, it still has places that are allowed to remain unbothered, even after thousands of years. If you have ever wished you had a quiet room inside yourself, some small interior space untouched by emails and expectations, this idea can feel like comfort. The pyramid has one, you can have one too. You do not have to build it with stone. You can build it with breath, in, slowly, out, softly. Now imagine the pyramid as a sleeping mountain. Its blocks are like stacked breaths, one on top of another, each laid with patience. Inside, corridors run like calm arteries. Some chambers are known, the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery, names given later, but rooms that have long existed as shapes in darkness. And somewhere beyond them, beyond the familiar maps, there is that quiet room. A hollow space, not seen by eyes, only sensed by invisible rain. At night, the pyramid seems to accept this mystery without tension. It does not worry about being fully understood. It simply stands, letting time pass over it the way wind passes over dunes. That is another lesson for sleep. You do not have to be fully understood tonight. You do not have to solve yourself before you rest. You can be like the pyramid, present, steady, allowed to contain unknown rooms. If a thought begins to prod you, what is the room for? Why is it there? Who made it? You can answer with kindness. It can wait. It can remain a soft question, like the sealed jar in Tanis, like the faint blue on stone. Questions do not have to be opened at bedtime. They can be set down gently. Now in our imagination, the small team finishes their work for the night. They pack their instruments carefully, not triumphantly, quietly. They take one last look at the pyramid's dark slope, and then they walk away, their footsteps small against the sand. The sky's invisible drizzle continues, the stars continue, the pyramid continues, and you, listening, can continue as well, downward toward sleep. Let me offer you a small image for that descent. Imagine you are walking inside the Great Pyramid, but you are not afraid. The corridor is cool. The air smells faintly of stone, like a clean cellar. Your hand slides along a wall, and the surface is slightly gritty, but steady, unchanging. Your footsteps are slow. Each step echoes softly, then the echo fades. It is as if the pyramid is practicing the same thing you are, letting sounds arrive and then letting them go. You come to a place where the passage rises, and for a moment you look up. The darkness above feels high and calm, like a night sky made of stone. You do not need a bright light, you only need a small one, enough to see the next step. That is what this story is too, a small light, enough for the next breath. In the distance, you sense the quiet room, the unseen void, not as a fear, but as a reassurance. Even here, inside stone, there is space, there is air, there is room to breathe. And then, as if the pyramid itself is guiding you, the corridor turns toward a gentler exit, and you find yourself back outside under stars where the desert wind touches your face like a cool cloth. We stand still for a while. If tonight's story has brought you calm, you can let your body accept that calm without tightening around it. You can let your muscles soften in small places, the forehead, the shoulders, the hands. And as we look at the pyramid silhouette, another soft thought rises, one that will guide the next part of our journey. If invisible visitors from the sky can reveal a hidden room inside stone, what else might they reveal in the wider landscape? Perhaps not only rooms, but the gentle truth that the past still has more to say, quietly, patiently, through methods that do not disturb sleep. In the next part, we will follow this idea to other places, other temples, other chambers, other forms of listening that feel like kindness. We will keep our pace slow. We will keep our voice warm. For now, let the pyramid remain a dark triangle against the star field, holding its quiet room inside. Let your breathing become the river again, steady, unbroken. Somewhere beyond the plateau, the Nile keeps moving in darkness, a long black ribbon that does not panic when it cannot see its own banks. I like to imagine a small boat out there, anchored quietly, lantern lowered, the water making the soft, repeating sound you chose earlier. The boat rocks once, twice, and the rhythm is so gentle it feels like a hand patting a pillow. On the pyramid stones, a thin layer of cool air settles, the way sleep settles on the body, first at the feet, then at the knees, then at the chest. Nothing is forced, everything is allowed. If a final thought arrives, set it beside the pyramid like a pebble and leave it there until morning. And if you are close to sleep, you may drift there now, as if walking into that hidden room not to explore it, but simply to rest in its spacious silence. Tonight, we keep moving the way the Nile keeps moving, without fuss, without sharp turns. The plateau of Giza, with its dark triangles against the stars, fades behind us like a dream image that remains warm even after it disappears. Our path follows the river south again, not quickly, but steadily, as if the water itself is guiding our pace. You may imagine a long, quiet ride on a boat whose sail barely stirs, whose hull makes that soft sound you chose earlier. Water brushing wood, wood brushing water. And if your mind is still carrying the day, you can let the river carry it for a while. In, slowly, out, even more slowly. Somewhere along this long ribbon of water, there is a place where time did something unusual. It paused, not forever, but in a way that feels almost tender, like a story left open on a table, waiting for the reader to return. People sometimes call it the lost city of the Golden Age, or simply the city of Aten. In modern terms, it is an ancient settlement that lay hidden under sand until careful hands began to uncover it, street by street, wall by wall, object by object, like unrolling a quiet life. I want to take you there tonight, not as an excavation headline, but as a calm walk through a neighborhood that has been sleeping, because there is something deeply soothing about ordinary things preserved. A bread oven, a doorway threshold worn smooth, a jar that still sits where someone set it down. Imagine arriving near the edge of the desert at late afternoon. The light is soft, the kind that makes everything look warmer than it is. In the distance, low walls appear, not tall like temples, but human height, built for daily life, built for walking and talking and carrying small burdens. We step closer, and the shapes become clearer. Narrow streets, courtyards, room after room, arranged like simple thoughts. The sand that once covered the city has been brushed away gently, and what remains is not drama, what remains is rhythm. You can picture a woman kneading dough in a courtyard, her hands dusted white, her movements steady, unhurried. You can picture a child walking barefoot on packed earth, the soles of their feet learning the day's temperature. You can picture a potter turning a wheel slowly, watching the clay rise into a bowl like a quiet moon. Even the air feels different here. It is not the cool, sealed air of a tomb, but the airy warmth of a home at dusk. A place where the last sunlight reaches into doorways and rests there, as if it is reluctant to leave. This is the kind of history I love to bring you at bedtime. Not kings and battles, not loud declarations, just life. Because life, when you look at it gently, has always been made of small repetitions. Waking, sweeping dust from a threshold, fetching water, lighting a small fire, sharing bread, closing a door at night. In the city of Aten, archaeologists have found signs of this repetition, objects that feel almost too familiar. Storage jars lined along a wall, as if someone planned to come back. Tools left where they were used, as if the day ended and the next day simply never arrived in the same way. Rooms that still carry the logic of living, a place to grind grain, a place to rest, a place to store. When you walk through such a place in your imagination, your nervous system often recognizes it. The mind relaxes when it understands the scene. There are no sudden surprises here, only the steady comfort of human routine. If you like, you can let your breathing match that routine. In, like lifting a jar of water. Out, like setting it down gently. Sometimes, as you walk, you can feel how the city's silence is not empty at all. It is full of softened echoes, the hush after laughter, the pause after a door closes, the resting place of footsteps. In one corner, you might see a low bench shaped from mud brick, smoothed by countless sits. In another, a shallow bowl that once held dates, now only holding shadow. And in a doorway, a strand of dried reed that once served as a simple curtain. None of these things asks you to analyze. They ask you only to notice the way you notice your own body settling deeper into a pillow. Notice, and then let it go. Even the air feels lined with patience, as if the neighborhood is telling you, there is time. Now notice the color of the walls. They are not polished granite. They are mud brick, earth mixed with straw shaped by hands, dried by sun. Mud brick has a softness even when it hardens. It holds warmth. It holds fingerprints sometimes. It feels like the ground has been persuaded into shelter. And on some walls there are faint marks, simple lines, quick notes, like a worker's reminder, like an inventory, like a name. Not carved for eternity, but written for a week, for a season, for a practical moment. That is another soothing truth. Not everything was made to last. And yet some things lasted anyway because time can be gentle as well as relentless. Sand can cover a place like a blanket. And when it does, it can preserve. As we walk, the streets are quiet, but not empty. They are filled with imagined sound, the soft scuff of sandals, the low murmur of conversation, the distant knock of a pestle grinding grain, the small crackle of an oven. You may notice that these sounds are not sharp. They are rounded. They are the sounds of a community living in the same rhythm. Here, no one rests alone. Even in memory, the streets hold the feeling of neighbors. If tonight's story is reminding you of your own daily rituals, making tea, washing dishes, folding laundry, let that be a comfort, not a burden. Rituals are not chains, they are rafts. They carry us across days that would otherwise feel too wide. In the city, there are also workshops, places where artisans shaped beauty out of ordinary materials. A small room where beads might have been drilled. A shaded corner where pigment could be ground, where Egyptian blue might have been mixed until it looked like dusk in a bowl. A bench where a scribe might have sat, practicing the calm art of writing. Imagine the scribe again, but here in a neighborhood, not a palace. He has a simple palette, he has a reed pen. He has the quiet dignity of someone who knows that attention is a form of love. He writes a list, he writes a label, he writes a short message for someone who will arrive later. And in doing so, he makes the day feel organized, held, less chaotic. Which is what many of us crave at night, after modern life has scattered our attention in too many directions. If you are feeling scattered, you can borrow the scribe's calm. Pick one thing to hold: the sound of water, the image of a mud brick wall warmed by late sun, the slow movement of a pen. Hold it gently, then let everything else soften around it. One of the most peaceful details in such a preserved city is the way it invites you to imagine the moment people left. Not as a disaster scene, not as a panic, just as a shift, an ending that did not announce itself loudly. Perhaps the residents were called elsewhere, perhaps work changed, perhaps the center of attention moved and the city quietly emptied. Whatever the reason, the feeling left behind is strangely intimate, a place mid-breath, a pot still near the oven, a jar still capped, a doorway still open enough for light. And that invites a reflection that fits the night. Sometimes we too leave parts of our life mid-breath. A hobby we meant to return to, a letter we meant to write, a conversation we meant to finish. It doesn't mean we failed, it means we've moved, and we moved with it. Some things remain unfinished, not because we are careless, but because time has its own current. Tonight, you do not have to finish everything. You can let your unfinished things become like this city. Quiet, covered, resting, safe. They can wait under a soft layer of night until you are ready. Now, as dusk deepens in our imagined city, lamps begin to glow. Not bright electric lamps, but small oil lights, steady, modest, warm. They turn the courtyards into pools of amber. They make faces gentler, they make shadows softer. And beyond the walls, the desert cools. A breeze arrives carrying the faint scent of dry sand and distant water. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the Nile far away, continuing its slow song. This is where our gentle suspense returns like a star appearing. Because near the edge of the settlement there is a place where the ground dips, a corridor perhaps, a storage space, a hidden room that feels a little cooler than the rest. It is not dangerous, it is simply unknown. And you already know from the pyramid's quiet room that unknown spaces do not have to be frightening. They can be restful, they can be spacious, they can be allowed. So we stand at the threshold of this cooler space. We let our lantern, small and warm, touch the entrance. We feel the air change, and we decide, without rushing, that we will step in together in the next part, where the story will turn from streets and ovens to the deeper idea that ancient people carried with them everywhere, the idea of breath, presence, and the gentle life inside a form. For now, let the city of Aten remain at dusk, walls glowing softly, jars sleeping in their places, footprints held in earth. Let your mind be like that city, organized enough to feel safe, quiet enough to feel sleepy. And let the Nile sound you chose keep playing, steady as a lullaby, until your breathing follows it without effort. If sleep comes early, let it come. The story will keep walking, softly, even without your attention. We stand at the threshold of the cooler space at the edge of the city, and we do not hurry. The evening has settled over Aten like a soft cloth. The courtyards behind us glow with small oil lamps, their light pooling on mud brick walls the color of warm bread. Somewhere a door closes gently. Somewhere a kettle of water is set down, and the sound is quiet enough to feel like kindness. Here, near the dip in the ground, the air changes. It becomes smoother and cooler, as if the earth is exhaling a long, patient breath. Our lantern does not flare. It only warms the darkness enough for the next step. If you are listening in your own room, let your body follow the same pace. Let your shoulders loosen by a fraction. Let your forehead soften. And if it helps, take one slow breath in and let it go as if you were letting sand slip through open fingers. We step down. Above us, the city's sounds become softer, filtered by earth. A lamp's distant crackle, a sandal's faint scrape. Then only our breathing and the gentle hush of coolness. The passage is not dramatic. It is practical. An entry meant for storage, for work, for the quiet keeping of things that matter. The walls are mud brick here too, but the bricks are cooler, shaded from the day. The floor is packed earth, firm underfoot. A faint scent rises, dry dust, a trace of straw, and something older, like a room that has been closed for a long time without becoming unfriendly. A few steps in, the temperature settles into steady comfort. And that steadiness does something to the mind. It tells the mind, you can stop scanning for surprises, nothing will leap, nothing will shout. This is a place built for calm. Along the wall, shallow niches appear, each one like a small shelf cut into darkness. In one niche, there is a jar with a lid still on it, the clay slightly cracked but intact. In another, a bundle of linen rests folded with care, as if someone planned to return and use it tomorrow. The scene feels almost modern in its simplicity, like opening a cabinet and finding everything still where it belongs. We move deeper, and the lantern reveals a low bench, then a small work table. On the table, there is a stone pallet used for grinding pigment. Beside it, a flat piece of limestone, the kind that could be used as a writing surface. And near the edge, almost hidden by shadow, there is a small figure. Not a statue the size of a person, not a monumental god towering over you. A modest figure, perhaps the height of your hand, carved with gentle precision. It sits as if it has been waiting, not for applause but for attention. You might notice the way the face is shaped, calm mouth, steady eyes, a posture that suggests composure rather than power. The figure is made of stone, but it carries the softness of intention. Someone looked at a human body and decided to honor it in miniature, to preserve a presence the way a candle preserves flame. This is where the ancient Egyptian idea of presence becomes very close. They believed that images could hold life in a quiet way. A statue could be more than decoration. It could be a resting place for a spirit, a home for an essence they called the ka, a kind of vital presence like breath that continues even when you cannot see it. You do not have to believe this, in the literal sense, to feel the tenderness of it, because you already live with something similar. A photograph can hold a person's presence so strongly that your chest changes when you look at it. A voice message can make someone feel near. A sweater can carry the shape and warmth of someone who once wore it. Presence can linger in forms quietly. So imagine the artisans of Aten shaping this small figure. The workshop is not far from here. The day is bright outside, but in the shade the air is cool. A craftsman holds a chisel and taps lightly, letting each mark be small enough to be corrected. A second artisan smooths the surface with stone and sand, patient as river water. No one is angry. No one is rushed. This is work done with breath. When the figure is finished, it is not treated like an object to be used up. It is treated like a companion. It is placed where it will be safe. It is offered a clean space. Perhaps a small bowl of water is set nearby. Perhaps a smear of pigment is added, Egyptian blue along the collar, a calm shade like twilight, a whispers of sky on stone. Now in our cool passage under Aten, the figure waits on the table, and our lantern makes a soft halo around it. The rest of the room remains dim and gentle. If your thoughts are drifting, let them drift to this idea. A small statue holding a breath. It reminds me of how the Egyptians sometimes spoke about breath itself. Breath was not only a biological thing, it was a sign of life, a visible, invisible gift. To give breath could mean to keep someone present. To withhold breath could mean to quiet a presence. They treated breath like a sacred thread. And because breath mattered, so did the places where breath was imagined to pass. The mouth, the nose, the small openings through which life moves in and out. There were times in history when people, frightened by the power of images, tried to silence them. Not with loud theatrics, but with simple acts meant to make a statue sleep more deeply. Acts meant to interrupt the idea of breath. We do not linger on the details because this is not a story for alarm. We only hold the softer truth beneath it. Humans have always been both tender and afraid. We build things to preserve presence, and sometimes we also try to protect ourselves from what we cannot fully understand. If that sounds familiar, it is because we do something similar in modern life, just in quieter, safer ways. When the world feels too loud, we mute notifications. We close a laptop. We dim the lights. We create a boundary that says, "Not now." It is not violence, it is self-care. It is the modern version of choosing which rooms in the mind stay open at night. So as you listen, you might let this reflection land gently. It is okay to close a door inside yourself tonight. It is okay to let certain thoughts stop breathing for a while. They will be there tomorrow if you need them. Tonight, you are allowed to rest. The small statue on the table seems to agree. It is still, it does not demand, it does not perform. It simply holds its composure, as if saying, "Presence can be quiet." We look closer and we notice a detail at the base of the figure, a small inscription scratched into the stone, shallow and careful. Not a grand proclamation, just a name perhaps and a few signs that suggest an offering. Bread, water, peace. A name again, always the name. In ancient Egypt, to keep a name was to keep a person from dissolving into dust. And this too can touch you tonight, because your own name has carried you through so many rooms. Workrooms, family rooms, crowded rooms, lonely rooms, bright rooms, dark rooms. Your name has been called in many tones, some kind, some hurried. But here, in the cool passage under Aten, we imagine your name being spoken softly, without demand. If you like, speak it inside your mind once, not sharply, like a lullaby. Now let us bring the Nile back, because the Nile always returns. If the listener is in the dark, what Nile river sound would you play to slow down their breathing immediately? Perhaps tonight it is the sound of water poured into a small bowl as an offering, a thin stream, steady, gentle, ending with a quiet finish. Let your breath become that stream, in and out, smooth, unbroken. As we stay with the statue and its quiet breath, the lantern light falls on the pigment palette beside it. There, in a shallow depression of stone, a smear of blue remains like a leftover piece of dusk. The blue is faint, but it is enough to connect everything: the sky painted underground, the The boat that slept under sand, the silver that held moonlight, the hidden room inside stone. All of them are ways humans tried to hold something steady against time, and perhaps that is the soft discovery of this part. History is not only about what happened, it is also about what humans longed for. They longed for continuity, they longed for protection, they longed for a gentle passage through darkness. You listening now are longing for something similar. Not a monument, not an answer, a passage. A calm crossing from wakefulness into sleep. So we let the statue remain where it is. We do not take it. We do not solve it. We simply acknowledge it, the way you acknowledge a candle without needing to touch the flame. And then, slowly, we turn back toward the street above. Our steps are unhurried. The cool air follows us like a blanket. At the top, the evening lamps of Aten glow again, steady and warm. We pause at the entrance and look once more into the dim passage. Inside, the small statue holds its breath-like presence. Outside, the city holds its human rhythm. And somewhere, beyond the walls, the Nile continues its slow song in darkness. In the next part, we will return to the river itself, back to the wide water that carried boats, stone, pigment, and names. We will let the river gather all these threads into one gentle current, and we will begin our final drift toward the quietest lesson of all, that the most beautiful things arrive in silence. When we leave the cool passage beneath Aten, we do it without waking the city. The lamps in the courtyards continue to glow, small and steady like fireflies that decided to stay close to the ground. Above the walls, the sky has darkened into a calm, velvety blue, and the first stars are beginning to show themselves, quietly, without announcement. We walk back toward the Nile. The path is easy. The way a familiar hallway is easy in a house you know well. Sand gives slightly under each step, and the night air feels clean on the skin, cooler than the day, kinder to the mind. Far off, a dog barks once, then stops, as if even the animals are practicing a gentler rhythm tonight. And then the river appears. At night, the Nile becomes a long, dark ribbon laid across the land. It does not glitter. It listens. It holds the reflections of a few scattered lights, lanterns on boats, a distant village lamp, the faint shimmer of a star that happens to fall at the right angle. Everything else is shadow, soft and safe. If you are in your room right now, you can let this image become your own water. Let the river be the place where your thoughts are allowed to float without needing to swim. And if you want, take one slow breath in and let it go, as if the exhale is a small boat pushed gently from shore. Not far from us, a simple vessel is anchored. Its hull is dark, and its rope is tied with the calm certainty of a sailor who trusts the night. A lantern hangs low, not to light the whole river, only to keep the boat company. The flame inside does not flicker wildly. It sways with the breath of wind, and the light moves like a soft pulse. Water brushes the wood in a steady, repeating sound. If the listener is in the dark, what Nile River sound would you play to slow down their breathing immediately? Perhaps it is this one, the quiet lap against a hull, the gentle knock of water that never rushes. Let your breathing match it, in and out, like a wave that arrives and leaves without struggle. Now, as we stand here, a memory of stone returns to us, the smooth granite, the sealed chambers, the hidden room inside the pyramid. We have been walking through layers tonight, river and desert, city and tomb, pigment and metal, name and presence. And the river gathers them all the way, a wide hand gathers loose threads. One of the softest truths about ancient Egypt is that it was never only monuments. It was also music. Not the loud music of celebration that demands attention, but the kind of music that moves slowly through corridors, comforting without asking. Music for work, music for ritual, music for evenings when the body is tired and the heart wants something steady. Imagine now a stone hallway inside a temple, long and cool. The ceiling is high enough to hold echoes, but the echoes are gentle, like breath returning. The walls are carved with calm figures, hands raised, offerings carried, birds and reeds and waterlines, patterns that feel like the Nile translated into stone. In this hallway, the air is cooler than outside and it smells faintly of dust and old incense. A few oil lamps sit in niches, their flames steady, their light warm and dim. The shadows on the columns move so slowly that they feel like they are dreaming. And somewhere in the distance, a harp begins, not a sudden chord, not an urgent tune, a slow, careful pluck, one note at a time, as if the player is choosing each sound the way a gardener chooses where to place a seed. In some periods of Egypt's long story, there were musicians who played in sacred spaces, and among them were blind harpists, men who listened with a different kind of attention. They could not rely on sight, so they relied on rhythm, on touch, on the honest truth of vibration. Their hands knew the strings the way a river knows its banks. Picture one of them now. He sits on a low stool, shoulders relaxed, the harp leaning like a quiet companion. His face is calm, neither smiling nor frowning, simply present. When he plucks, the sound is warm and round, and it travels down the corridor like a soft lantern carried on air. The notes do not demand that you understand anything. They only invite you to slow. If your mind has been working too hard today, calculating, deciding, worrying, this is where it can stop. Because music does not ask you to solve it, it asks you to feel it, and feeling is softer than thinking. Listen in your imagination as the harp repeats a simple phrase. A few notes, then a pause. A few notes, then a pause. The pauses are not empty. They are where the calm lives. You can let your breath fall into those pauses. In, during a note, out, during the space after it. And while the harp plays, we remember why ancient people built stone corridors in the first place, not only for display but for atmosphere. Stone holds temperature. Stone holds sound. Stone holds silence the way a bowl holds water. In such spaces, a single instrument can feel like a whole sky. Now, very gently, let this become a reflection. You have your own corridors. They may not be made of limestone, but they exist in the shape of your days. The hallway between your bedroom and your kitchen, the short walk from your car to your building, the small time between one email and the next. In those corridors, you can choose what sound you carry. You can carry a harsh sound, news, urgency, the sharp edges of other people's moods. Or you can carry a softer sound, water, wind, a steady piece of music. Tonight, you are choosing the softer sound. That is not weakness, that is wisdom. The Egyptians, in their own way, understood this. They placed music near life's thresholds, birth, work, prayer, and death. Not because life was easy, but because music could make it bearable, could make it beautiful, could make it feel held. And if you have felt alone at night before, let this thought land gently. You are not the first human to seek comfort in sound. Across thousands of years in different rooms under different skies, people have listened for the same thing you are listening for now, a rhythm that makes the body unclench. Here, no one rests alone. In the temple corridor, the harp continues. The notes slide along the stone, then soften and disappear, like footprints in sand after wind. Nothing insists on staying. Everything is allowed to come and go. If a memory arrives for you, something tender, something bittersweet, let it arrive the same way the music arrives, without force. And if it wants to leave, let it leave. You do not have to hold it tightly to honor it. Sometimes the kindest way to honor a memory is to let it pass through, like moonlight through a curtain. Now we step back from the temple hallway and return to the river again. The anchored boat is still there, the lantern is still low, the water is still practicing its steady, repeating sound. You may notice, if you listen closely, that the river's rhythm and the harp's rhythm have begun to blend. Water against wood, note against stone. A lullaby made of two ancient materials, river and rock. And in that blending, a very quiet truth appears, like the soft discovery of the night. The past is not only information, it is a way of calming the nervous system. It is a reminder that humans have always built gentleness into the world, through boats, pigments, names, music, and careful rooms hidden inside stone. So when your mind says, "I shouldn't need help relaxing," you can answer with kindness, "Humans have always needed help relaxing. We have always made tools for peace." Tonight, this story is one of those tools. Now let us begin to drift toward our ending slowly, as if the river itself is guiding us home. Imagine stepping into the anchored boat. You sit down on a wooden bench that feels cool at first, then warms. The air smells faintly of river water and rope. The lantern's glow is small, and it makes your hands look softer. The boat rocks once, twice. The movement is gentle enough to quiet the mind without needing words. If you are close to sleep, let your eyelids grow heavier. If you are not, let your body rest anyway. Either way, you are doing something good. You are giving yourself a quiet moment, and quiet moments matter. Tomorrow will still be there. Your tasks will still be there. But tonight, you are allowed to be like the river. Present, steady, not rushing, to finish. In the next part, we will let the boat drift along the Nile one last time, carrying all the images we gathered. Blue sky on stone, silver moon in earth, a hidden room inside a pyramid, a city paused mid-breath. We will lower the lantern even more. We will soften the voice even more. And we will end the way the Nile ends each day. Not with a slam, but with a slow, forgiving fade into darkness. Before we drift, I'll offer one more small practice, as gentle as the harp's pause. If your phone is nearby, you don't need to touch it. Just imagine the screen dimming. If a notification lives in your thoughts, set it down beside the river and let the water carry its urgency away. And if tonight's story stirred a beautiful memory, someone's laugh, a childhood room, a peaceful drive under streetlights, let that memory float here too, without gripping it. If you ever feel like speaking, share it below when you're ready. For now, breathe and let the Nile soften the edges of time. Here, your tired mind is welcome. You don't have to be strong, only willing to rest now. The boat rocks in the dark once, twice, as if the Nile is turning the last pages of a long, gentle book. The lantern hangs low, and its light is soft enough to feel like a whisper. It does not try to brighten the whole world. It only keeps a small circle of warmth around you, the way a bedside lamp keeps a small corner of safety for a tired mind. Water touches the hull in that steady rhythm you chose earlier. Not dramatic, not demanding, only consistent, like the kindest kind of presence. If you want, let your breathing become exactly that sound. In as the water arrives, out as it leaves. Nothing to prove, nothing to force. Tonight we have walked through many places, but we did it the way sleep walks through the body, slowly in waves. We began at dawn beside the Nile, where the river looked like silk and the air smelled of reeds. We stepped down into cool stone, where polished surfaces felt like mirrors and silence felt safe. We followed wood into the story, imagining a solar boat that slept under sand for thousands of years, and the faint cedar scent that rose like a held breath finally released. We touched a blue that could glow quietly, as if the sky itself was willing to rest underground. We drifted north into the delta, where canals whispered and a silver coffin held moonlight in metal. We let a small sealed container suggest far horizons and gentle questions, paths of trade and connection that moved at the pace of wind and patience. We returned to the pyramids, and we felt the comfort of knowing that even a famous stone mountain can hold a quiet room inside it, untouched and spacious. We walked through a city that paused mid-breath, where jars and ovens and thresholds still waited like unfinished sentences. We sat beside a small statue that held presence like breath, reminding us that humans have always tried to keep what matters safe. And we listened to music in a stone corridor, the slow harp notes that made time feel kinder. Now all of those images sit together in the boat with you. They are not heavy. They are not loud. They are like smooth stones collected on a riverbank. Each one cool, each one calming, each one something your hand can hold without strain. If any one image feels especially peaceful, you can keep it. Perhaps it is the Nile at first light. Perhaps it is Egyptian blue like twilight in a bowl. Perhaps it is silver like moonlight. Perhaps it is the hidden room inside the pyramid, a quiet space you don't need to enter to feel comfort from. Perhaps it is the warm hush of a mud brick street at dusk. Perhaps it is the harp's pause, sound followed by silence, silence followed by sound. Choose one and let it rest near your heart. And if your mind wants to wander, let it wander along the riverbank without getting lost. The Nile is good at guiding drift. It curves, it returns, it continues. Even in darkness, it does not panic when it cannot see its own edges. It simply keeps moving the way breath keeps moving, moment by moment. Here is a gentle truth I want to leave you with tonight. The most beautiful things often arrive in silence. Not in the loud, announcing silence that feels like pressure, but in the soft silence that comes after a day has been fully lived. The silence that lets the body unclench, the silence that makes room for sleep to do its quiet healing work. In ancient Egypt, so much was built to honor that kind of silence. They built chambers where air stayed cool and calm. They painted sky blue on stone so the mind could remember the heavens even underground. They crafted boats for the sun, not to create spectacle, but to promise continuity. They wrote names because they wanted presence to endure gently. They played music in corridors because they knew sound could soothe the spirit. And you in your modern life are doing something similar right now. You are building a small sanctuary out of listening, out of breath, out of a story that moves slowly enough for your nervous system to trust it. If you feel tired, that is not a failure. That is a truth the body is speaking. And you are honoring it. Now, before we fully drift, I want to return one last time to the question we carried through the night, because it was never just a question about Egypt. It was a question about gentleness. If the listener is in the dark, what Nile River sound would you play to make them slow down their breathing immediately? Tonight, perhaps the answer is simple: the sound of water brushing a boat that is already safe. Because that is what you need at night. Not another push forward, not another demand, but proof that you are held. Let your breath match that proof. In, slow. Out, slower. Now I will offer you a closing image, like the last scene of a calm film, one that fades out softly, without asking you to stay awake. The boat drifts slightly, not far, just enough for the lantern's reflection to shimmer on the water. Above, the sky is wide, stars are scattered like quiet seeds. The far bank is a dark line of palms. Somewhere in a village, a dog sighs and goes quiet again. The river continues, and in that continuation, everything you could not finish today becomes less urgent. Emails, plans, unanswered questions. They can rest like sealed rooms under sand. They can wait like a city paused mid-breath. They can be held the way the pyramid holds its hidden space, without pressure. If a thought tries to grab you, something sharp, something anxious, imagine placing it into that little sealed container from Tanis. Close the lid gently, set it beside the silver moonlight coffin, leave it there for the night. You can return to it if you truly need to, but you likely won't. The river is already carrying you elsewhere. Now, as our journey ends, I want to speak to you the way the night speaks. Simply, kindly, without drama. You did enough today. Your mind worked hard. Your heart carried what it could. And now, it is time to let the river do the carrying. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. Only when you're ready. If this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys. Here, no one rests alone. Every story from the past is a soft lantern in the dark, gently lighting our way tonight. Now, let the lantern lower, let the boat rock. Let the Nile's sound become quieter, 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 until it is only a feeling, a slow, warm fade, a soft closing of the book, a breath in and a breath out. And then, without needing to decide anything, you drift.
Our story pauses here. Every visual and word you've experienced was assisted by AI, yet guided and perfected by sincere human emotion. We hope this harmony of history and technology has crafted a beautiful dream for you tonight. Let go and drift deep into sleep. Good night.